Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Jouar, and today is Friday, December 15th, 2023. And I've got the wonderful Andrea Smith here with me. Hi, Andrea. How are you?
I'm great, Miriam. I'm so happy to finally be joining you.
Thanks for coming on the show. I think we also have another guest here. This is Max, yes?
This is Max. Max is one of those cats that could be sleeping anywhere in the house, but as soon as I get on any kind of video call, he's here wanting to hug the spotlight.
I mean, it's a cat thing to do, right? So yeah. I'm not too surprised.
I actually have to lock my keyboard so he doesn't sit on it.
Well, that makes sense. So for those of you who are not watching on Patreon right now, know that there is a video version of this podcast you can subscribe to every week that comes out in advance of the audio version where you get to watch Max being cute and adorable. So Andrea, I was wondering if you want to talk about Beeper and the iMessage saga that's been happening since the last show. We talked about how awesome it was that Beeper Mini exists and lets you do iMessage on an Android phone. Literally, while we were recording the show last week, Apple shut that down. So, are you surprised?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, not surprised at all. Tim Cook said it many times. You know, there's just, I think the fact that they say that they're working on some sort of interoperability with other means is great, and everybody was all excited about that. But I don't think Apple's going to let anybody into that walled garden. No way, no how.
Do you think that potentially the EU's regulationary machine? I'm not a huge fan, to be honest, even though I grew up and was born in Europe. I appreciate regulation when it's needed. In this case, it might be needed. And my angle here is it's not. There are technical reasons, but also more concerned right now about the bullying and the fact that it's dividing people in this market, in this country, and in Canada, and in other markets. Not as much in Europe, of course. There's historical reasons for that. But I think, to me, it goes against, kind of the Apple approach. Yes, I understand they are a business. They want to make money and sell their devices. I respect that. And it's a free market, and that's what America is about. But at the same time, I feel like we are in a situation now where children, young people are being basically forced to be on iMessage, or they're outcast by their peers. And it's adults too. Like, I've heard from people who are on group chats for their HOAs or whatever being, singled out for being on a green bubble Android phone. And the fact that it also breaks these group messaging sessions somewhat. So all of this is real. And all of this is partially caused by some technical limitations on SMS and MMS. But we now have RCS, which Apple said they will adopt. But I still feel that the biggest issue is not a technical issue. It's that green versus blue, right? Wouldn't you say?
It is. And I have to tell you, I myself am on several group chats where there's just one person who's a green bubble. And it drives me crazy because I can't rename the group. If there's a non-Apple user in there, you can't rename the group. Files get sent at different varying levels. It's frustrating. Now, obviously, it would be great if it all worked together, and I don't green bubble shame anybody. But, I've seen in reading it on threads, there's a lot of, green bubble, blue bubble, take your toys and go home going on.
It is, and that's kind of what I feel like Apple needs to address somewhat. And it would be very simple. They could just make iMessage for Android. And if they really wanted to be, and I don't know if this is a solution, because I feel like this is, again, an access issue, a class issue in terms of income and money. But I think they should monetize it, potentially even, like sell a subscription to iMessage on Android, like Beeper was trying to do, which I think is outrageous, to be honest. By the way, as much as I love the technical, the hack, as it were, that they did, and I think it's exciting, I feel that they should never have charged money for this. This is not the way you approach something like that. right?
No, I think that, yeah, what they're doing is great. It's like a David and Goliath thing, right? So I think if
Yeah.
they came in and they were the hero and they said, hey, we've done this, we figured out how to do this for you and gave it away,
Yeah.
it would be so magnanimous, right? It would be like, we're solving the world's problem of blue bubble versus green bubble. But the fact that they're charging for it, there's no way Apple will stand for that.
Exactly. And I don't think Apple will stand for it, period, simply because they are hacking a system. Even
Yeah.
though they're finding holes in it, Apple's going to patch these holes. It all makes sense to me. But I think Apple should pull back and look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that this is not going to go away and it's causing harm to people. And I think we need an iMessage for Android, even if it's a very, very affordable subscription.
But do you think any Android user would actually say, I will give Apple money to join this ecosystem?
Well, there are some Android users that use Apple Music. Apple Music is available, right? So maybe bundle it with Apple Music, right?
True.
That could be a solution.
You could do that. Yep.
So
Yep.
I'm just saying, like, that's on the users at that point. Like, right now, people who have a low income and can only afford to buy a Moto G, right? $150 Moto G, are left out of this conversation because there is no $150 iPhone, right? So to me, that's the problem. Charging a subscription is also a problem, but I think it's less so because perhaps if it's reasonable, people can budget that and they can choose to do it or not, right? But if it's more than $2 a month or something, I think it gets to be a problem. So, but it's the source of revenue for Apple. Think about it, right?
So listen to this, and this is a perspective your audience may not always think of. As a parent, and I did a digital parenting podcast for many years. Parents want so badly to buy their kids a Bark phone or a Gab phone or something with parental controls that are really good and that really work. Apple's parental controls suck. They are constantly failing. But parents are saying that their child will not accept any phone that's not an iPhone because they have to have the blue bubble.
And to be frank, having used the Gap phone, it's a disaster.
Right. Yes.
Like,
but for,
I'm
for
not
a 10-year-old, maybe, until somebody actually, should be old enough to have a phone. I'm not for giving any 10-year-old any phone, but I think as a parent, you're kind of forced to buy an iPhone because that's what your kid wants, or they'll be shamed.
Right. I think that, Apple could argue that they're still going to be shamed if they show up at school with an Android phone running iMessage, right? But at the same time, it's less obvious. And, my whole assertion around this has been that, in my opinion, as an engineer, as a technical person, Apple broke messaging by creating iMessage. Like WhatsApp and Telegram and all these alternatives did not break the very core of SMS, MMS, and RCS because they are not the default app, right? The moment, essentially, Apple co-opted your phone number by making it no longer do the default SMS, MMS thing, but go through data through their servers, they broke a standard that the GSMA has created. That has been my issue all along with iMessage. I don't have a problem with using data for messaging. Having all these awesome features like read receipts and typing indicators and high resolution content. All of that is amazing. We want it. But why did you have to break a standard to get there? Yes, there was no other option, but they could have just made iMessage a second app like FaceTime that is called upon by the messaging text MMS app that you can fire off, but not the default.
You mean make it an option?
Yeah. Or make it, like as I said, FaceTime is a second app. It's a separate app, right? Like, and I know that they wanted it to be Apple, it just works. But in doing so, they have basically broken the system. And it's been broken for 15 years or whatever, iMessage 2011 or whenever it came out. Like, I'm not happy about this. It's been bothering me from a technical perspective.
Well, I understand that. But I think that most people don't know what you and I know, right? They don't know that stuff about technology. They just know that they bought an iPhone. It has iMessage and it works, and they can get their blue bubble and they can get a read receipt and they can edit it now and do all those things. Now, how many people go to Europe and are surprised, and baffled why their iMessage isn't working when they've put their phone on airplane mode, um, you know, and all of a sudden they realize, wait a minute, without cellular data, I can't even get an iMessage, and they have to go use WhatsApp. WhatsApp is the standard, right? Everyone can use this. I know when I go to Europe, when we go to IFA in Berlin, I switch over to WhatsApp. You just, why can't they both work together? Why can't that whole concept and Android phones all work together? I honestly think it's that Apple wants to sell hardware.
And this again, I think they have an obligation. When your company gets big enough, you start having some ethical obligations. And I think that's the problem we have with this free market. And that's why I sometimes applaud regulation. USB-C on the iPhone is, a lot of people are not happy about it right now because they don't understand the history of it and they don't understand where we're going with technology. But, to them, it's just an inconvenience. And you saw the price of Lightning phones used going up in price. The used prices go up right when the iPhone 15 was announced. But the fact that Europe put their foot down and said, no, you have to do this, I think in this case is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The world was built on standards. We cannot ignore this. USB-C, for better or for worse, is a standard. It has its flaws. Lightning is technically better in some ways. But the reality is, we wouldn't have the internet if we didn't have standards. We wouldn't have cars that all drove on the same side of the streets. We wouldn't all agree that traffic lights are red or green and do the same thing for red or green if we didn't have standards.
You need protocols and standards. And look at how everyone is clamoring for protocols and standards in AI right now as it's just emerging.
Exactly.
You have to establish these. I think what they did with USB-C is fabulous, but I can't tell you how many times I had to stop and explain to someone who, just unknowingly, not that they're ignorant, but they wouldn't know anything about why it happened. And I have to explain the whole e-waste, and now it works with my laptop charger and it's faster, and all of these reasons why USB-C is okay, and forced Apple to do it. So do you think, I don't know how prevalent iPhone is in Europe compared to the market share here,
but because WhatsApp is huge too, it's not less of a problem, right? I don't think too many people in Europe use iMessage. But for example, I talk to my friends in the UK a lot, tech journalists there, and they say, yeah, the iPhone dominates, just like in the US. Because any market that has subsidies, right, from the carriers right now, that's where Apple is and Samsung are strongest, right?
Right.
And Apple by a wide margin, really, if you think about it, it's they've won the battle. And I don't know if you saw, my whole premise last week on my show was when we started talking about Beeper with my guest Quinn, was that there is a story that Will Saddleberg of Android Police wrote recently that's basically piggybacked on the statistics that the majority of teenagers in the US want an iPhone or have an iPhone and would never consider anything but an iPhone. And so what does that mean for Android long term, right? So that's what we talked about. That's how the whole Beeper conversation started in our podcast last week. And I think that honestly, Apple is not going to lose this battle in terms of dominating the market. So they don't even have to worry about it. Even if they gave away iMessage for Android, it wouldn't be a huge amount of costs for them. It might be short term, but long term, they're winning anyway. So what's the big deal?
Yeah, and they are winning. And it is, that whole generation is growing up saying they want iPhones. And I think that, what would happen if Android people got to use iMessage? Do you think any Android users would say, hey, I want to check out an iPhone? Would they want to try the hardware? Or is it just that they want to be part of that iMessage system?
I think it could be a gateway drug. Honestly, look, I'm an Android user primarily. I just bought an iPhone 15 Pro Max after being on an iPhone 11 because Apple doesn't send me devices. So every 2 or 3 years I buy a new iPhone. But I didn't even upgrade from the 11 because I didn't feel like the need to. It was still working so well for me, which is a testament to Apple's brilliance here. But whereas, Android phones, good luck if after 2 or 3 years, I'm pretty much for sure replacing them. But here's the thing, right? The 15 Pro Max I have, it doesn't want to make me switch. iOS is still something I don't feel happy and comfortable using. It still
But don't you
doesn't
think
meet my needs.
But that's because that's what you're used to. I mean, I feel like in so many
Partially.
ways, it's what you're used to. Now, I was an iPhone person from the beginning, although I will confess to you, even as a tech journalist, I just traded in my iPhone 12 for a new
Well, there
iPhone
you go. I
15
mean,
Pro
they're so
because it
good.
worked fine. It worked
Yes.
absolutely fine and it did everything I needed it to do. They don't send me phones either. So there was no way I was giving Apple more money until I, really found a need to. However, I know, and I have Android phones here all over. I've got the OnePlus Open and I've got the Pixel and I really have to use my brain and think about using the Android operating system. But I think it's just because that's not my default OS. It's
There
not
is
what
a
I'm
lot of
used
that
to.
for me as well with iOS. I'll admit it. But I still feel like for a while there, I thought iOS is getting so close to my needs that I will probably switch at some point. But now that I've had the 15 Pro Max for a little while, I'm like, no, it's still not quite there for me.
What's
It's
missing?
mostly notifications are an absolute disaster on
Ah,
iOS. For me, that's it. That's the biggest obstacle right now. And then I love the variety of the Android ecosystem in terms of hardware, right? Like for me, it's the ability to change phones this is a very tech journalist perspective, right? I get these devices like you just mentioned, you have the OnePlus Open and the Pixel and everything. I've got everything. And we're going to talk about some phones that can't even be sold in the US that I have. Well, they're available through Alibaba and Amazon, I think, but they're not officially sold and supported here. But I have all these phones. So I actually get to sample the whole enchilada, as it were, every year. And honestly, it's so delightful. The OnePlus Open is a perfect example that is available in North America that represents why I like Android better besides the software, right? It's that ability that suddenly, with all the right levers and sliders adjusted, this company, Oppo, made a phone that I think is brilliant. It's just brilliant. And I was not a folding phone person before the Open. I mean, I like the flip form factor a lot, but
right.
the book style, I was like, why would you want that? Like, I have a laptop. It's great. I don't use tablets. I'm not a big fan of tablets. I think they're amazing. The iPad is incredible. It's just not for me. So why would I need? And then I use I've had every generation of Z Fold in my hand, right? And it didn't stick. And then look what different software can make. It's incredible. Like I didn't think this was going to be a big deal. And then I've also got the Pixel Fold and I love it too, but not as much as the Open.
That's really interesting because I didn't play with the fold a whole lot. I do like a flip phone. I like the flip phone form factor as well.
Yeah, it's
was
nice.
not a big fold fan, and I didn't use the Pixel one. But when I started using the OnePlus Open, I was so surprised at how much I liked it. I mean, it just the form factor is great. It looks great. There's no crease in the middle, and for me, the software was not as much of a learning curve for some reason because it was still not an iOS operating system. But I just thought it worked beautifully.
No, it's. I mean, I've had a lot of phones from OnePlus and Oppo and Realme and Vivo who are all under BBK Group, and I have to tell you, this has got to be the best phones they've ever made so far. Like of all of them, like Oppo has made some choice devices that are, chef's kiss. OnePlus has always been relegated to a slightly lesser experience. But this time, obviously this phone is also sold as the Oppo N3 in some markets. They are exactly the same device. So you can tell that OnePlus has finally obtained the best they could obtain from their parent. And it pays, like you can tell. But, I've sang the praises of the Open on this show a lot. And it doesn't mean I'm still not on a Pixel as my main phone. And it's mostly because of, it's kind of like, I feel like I'm an iOS user, but on the Android side, because all of the benefits that the Google software brings to the table, especially call management, things like, hold for me, call screening, etc., right? All that stuff is why I'm on a Pixel. And the cameras, but now the OnePlus Open cameras are so good that I'm not really reaching for my Pixel as much. You've noticed, folks, if you're paying attention, that there's very few photos in my Instagram stream that say Pixel 8 Pro, because I tag all my photo with the device I use. You'll see most of them say OnePlus Open because it's been my default. And I've never done this before. I've never actually, in my mind, set another phone than the Pixel as my main camera phone. So the point
That's
I'm
really
making,
interesting.
yeah, the point I'm making is that I'm a bit also in that green bubble, blue bubble world with the Pixel, because as soon as I go to the OnePlus Open as my main phone, I immediately miss the call screening. I immediately miss because I get lots of spam calls and stuff. And being able to screen them, look on the screen while I'm walking down the street, while I'm having a conversation with my friends, without having to pick up my phone and, be harassed is lovely. And so yeah, I also things like some of the Google Photo features, like the unblur, which are only available on Pixels,
Right.
etc. Right? So eventually, those trickle down. Like what was it? Magic Eraser is now available on anybody.
Right.
So
So when I first got the Pixel 7 last year when it came out and I was reviewing it, and I was in love with that Magic Eraser feature. And I again, I had an iPhone 12, but the photos on the Pixel look so beautiful that when I go to a meeting with a company or I have to take shots for work, I'll shoot them with the Pixel phone, not the iPhone, because I know they're going to be better, that I'm going to be able to do some little edits if I want to.
yep,
And in fact, I'm looking, I really want to try the 8 now, the 8 Pro, and use that
it's
camera
amazing.
and the AI.
Yeah,
And I look forward to reviewing that just for that reason. But to use it as my everyday phone, I still don't think I could.
interesting. Yeah, so I think we all have kind of our preferences, and it shows. I just feel like Beeper is not in a place where they're going to win this battle. Like, if, a disclaimer, I worked for Pebble as the head of communications and kind of their evangelist for consumer stuff back in the day when early on when they did the first few watches and they were
Hi.
at the height of their um influence, as it were. And I've worked with Eric Mijikovsky, the CEO, and he's a really smart and wonderful guy, but I think this is very misguided in the same way as not being able to counter the Apple Watch in some way was very misguided with Pebble back in the day. And I wish them luck, but I appreciate the activism behind what they're doing. I do think that this bullying thing around iMessage is a real issue. And
It is.
I want Apple to address this somehow, but at the same time, the charging for it was egregious. And also, in addition to that, if they have any delusions it's a game of whack-a-mole they're gonna lose, it's a game of whack-a-mole they're gonna lose. Like, come on,
Yes.
guys.
Yes.
Like, are you setting yourselves up as the victim so we can pat you on the head? Please. Like, this is silly.
And I think also Apple, they're not going to let it stand, especially since Beeper's charging for this. But they've come out and said that they want this cross-platform RCS, to kind of for messaging protocol. But they haven't really talked about what that's going to be, right? They haven't talked about what that's going to look like a whole lot. But at least they're not standing there tone deaf saying, no, you can't do this, and we're not going to do anything to work on it either.
Yeah, I think the RCS announcement was to appease the Europeans a little bit. I think that, look, because you were asking me about this earlier and I want to answer it, because it's not as much of a dichotomy. iMessage is not a big deal in Europe in general overall because
Right.
everybody's on another platform, WhatsApp in particular. I don't think there's going to be regulation from the EU, but what is going to happen from the EU is, hey, you're not supporting RCS. It's the standard now. That's
Yes.
going to happen because
Yes.
the
And it
EU
should.
the EU created the GSMA. Like the GSM is a European standard that became a world standard, guys. Okay. So the reality is that if you don't want to mess with GSMA, like that's the bottom line. And everybody knows that. And actually, it's a good thing because we need standards. Otherwise, where would we be? So RCS is great, but the problem is that they haven't committed to making the RCS chats blue bubbles, and they haven't committed to making or purple or something else even, right?
Right.
They haven't
Purple
committed.
would be good.
Yeah, they haven't committed to making RCS encrypted using Google's encryption, which is the only way you can get RCS encryption right now. Like, I use the Google message client on all my Android phones, and my spouse does they have both an iPhone and a Samsung Flip. And because two countries, two numbers, two networks. And they, when we talk, RCS encrypted to RCS encrypted using the Messages app from Google, it's just like you're on iMessage. It's fantastic. Everything's working. Everything's great. Everything's secure. I understand Apple wanting security to be, at the forefront of their experience for their users. But I'm sorry to tell you that if you don't support iMessage for Android, all the communications that your iPhone users are having with Android users is insecure and corrupt right now. And, it's not matching the message you're putting out there, right? That's what I want to tell Apple. That and the bullying are the reasons why, as a responsible, thoughtful corporate entity, you should be patching this by giving iMessage to Android users.
And they're saying, and I get it, they're saying that they're trying to block techniques that are going to exploit fake credentials, right? I get the whole safety thing. I understand that. And honestly, I would not want to share my Apple credentials with a third-party app that's
100%.
charging me money, right? No way. So, so many people are jumping on this beeper thing because they're so excited about it, but they're also not thinking about the security of it and giving away their credentials. So I get why Apple's pulling in the reins a little bit, but I think, yes, they're also trying to loosen the rein a little bit to appease the whole RCS protocol movement that's going on.
Yeah, I think, right now they have no immediate incentive to deal with this other than, a bunch of very vocal activists in the tech sphere, right? But I think they should be keeping an eye on things because I think they have a responsibility, as I said, to be the best corporate citizens they can be. And I hope they see that. And look, I really don't think iMessage for Android, especially if you charge $1 or $2 a month for it, is going to make people not buy iPhones. If anything, it's going to make people switch to the iPhone even more. That's the reality. Look, why do you have Apple Music for Android if you don't believe that, Apple?
Right. And they absolutely should have it for Android.
So, yeah. To me, living in a full Apple ecosystem, which I don't do, although I have all the devices. I'm a Mac user primarily. I love my Macs. I have been for years. But, I don't subscribe to all of the services, right, and pay for them or anything like that. So I basically very much use my Mac as a PC, right, as a personal computer, not a Windows. I also use my Android phone as an Android phone. And so they talk to each other with protocols that are standards, but I don't really benefit from things like continuity or whatever. And I don't care personally. Right. It's fine. I do understand, though, that the people who do it, who have the entire vertical Apple ecosystem in their pockets, in their bags, and on their desks, that's the killer app. That's what sells Apple, in my opinion. It's not just iMessage, right? Come on. So I don't think Apple giving away 1/10 of this entire amazing experience by making iMessage available for Android is going to lose much at all. If anything, I think in the same way as they gained so many Mac users during COVID and before that, when they switched to Intel, remember back in 2005? It was a huge thing. All of a sudden, we were our little happy PowerPC Mac users out there holding the fort. The iPod was a thing. We're finally, Apple is successful. And then, boom, they did the Switch campaign. Remember that? Ad campaign. Yep. And oh my God, the influx of people on the platform. It was glorious. So look, maybe that's the solution. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not the whole Apple ecosystem because I use the iPhone and I do have an iPad, but I never use Apple Music. I won't pay for Apple Music and I don't have a Mac. I use a PC. So, none of my devices talk to each other. But, I'm just one of those people that's not all in on the Apple ecosystem.
Same with me. And that's okay. There are some people who are yeah, absolutely, I'll do the whole thing. And I'm like, you do you, but I'm not ready for that yet. Let's switch gears and talk about some of the news, because last week, Quinn and I had such a strong debate about the Cybertruck. I mean, we agree, actually. So, but it was such a strong topic that took up the entire show that we actually didn't get a chance to talk much about the the topics. So there's a few things that are kind of I want to rapid fire through some links for the audience so that you guys know what's going on. The first thing is last week we talked about OnePlus 12 really briefly because it had finally launched in China. It's coming to North America at some point. I'll get a review in it. Stay tuned. You can read and watch content from people who went and bought it in China, like Benson or whatever, and check it out. My point is, I'm excited about this one. The camera system should be the same as the Open, but basically as a bar phone with an incredibly bright 4500 nit screen. Should be really interesting. And of course, Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, right?
And did they put wireless charging back into that?
Yeah, 50 watt wireless and 100 watt wired. So this is the whole enchilada.
That was so weird taking it away.
Yeah, I keep using that expression. I love it. Anyway, but yeah, this phone is looking to be, if it's priced right, the OnePlus return beyond the Open that was already a very great product. And I think the 11, despite its lack of wireless charging, was a solid device last year too.
Yes.
But what's interesting is that Oppo Group, BBK Group, Oppo, so technically there's Oppo and OnePlus is under Oppo, and then there's Realme, and then there's Vivo, and Vivo has IQ under it. So that's the hierarchy for that group. But if you look at a Realme phone next to an Oppo and OnePlus, they are so similar in terms of software and hardware because they all use the same parts bin that I don't understand why Realme is not underneath Oppo. Like, why is still a separate thing? I wouldn't be surprised in the next few years Realme gets absorbed under Oppo like OnePlus. Realme is kind of like they're the OnePlus, what OnePlus used to be. They're the value leader in that BBK ecosystem. And they've been going up market. Remember that experience with OnePlus? They've been going up market themselves. And lo and behold, they just launched a new phone 2 days after the OnePlus 12. And guess what? Lo and behold, it is almost identical to the OnePlus 12. How interesting. So that's China only right now. A device arrived on my doorsteps yesterday, folks. So expect an unboxing video and some content soon. I'll leave links in the show notes for all of this, but what the takeaway here, Andrea, is that the GT5 Pro from Realme is essentially the OnePlus 12 with a slightly smaller screen, just as bright, 4500 nits, Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, and the camera system is almost identical as the Open and the 12, but the ultra wide is being kind of like budgetized to just an 8 megapixel basic ultra wide. But everything else, wireless charging, all of that is there. Metal frame, it's beautiful. So
and pricing, and it's an affordable price.
It's about €100 or dollars less than the OnePlus 12, but China prices are always, very subsidized by their respective ecosystem. Every brand there has its own kind of like iCloud and Siri and thing, So I mean, we're looking at right now, I think it's €600 or US dollars for the OnePlus 12 in China and 500 for the Realme. But again, you can easily add $200 to that for Western prices.
Right.
So it's still very exciting though, because it's a very beautiful phone. And I'm happy to see Realme going up market, basically,
It's funny. I used to, when I covered, the OnePlus phones as they came out, that's exactly what I used to call them, is like kind of getting everything you like about a Samsung Android phone, all those flagship features, but at a more affordable price. That's just always how I described it.
Yeah. And so we'll see how that pans out. I'll let you know, folks. The other news we have here that I think you might be able to have some thoughts on is Samsung. So the rumors up to now on Samsung's Galaxy is the Ultra in particular, which is the highest end one they make, which is a phone I adore every year because of the cameras, and I'm a camera person in my phones. I love good cameras. So the rumor was that, right now there is like the ultra wide, the main camera, a 3x telephoto and a telex telephoto, right? That's basically what it is. The rumor for a while was that they were going to replace the 10x with a 5x. So it's going to be 1, 3, 5, but the 5 is going to be a big 50 megapixel sensor. So it could zoom up to more by, pixel cropping and all that stuff. Turns out the latest rumors are it's actually going to be ultra wide 1x, 5x, 10x, with that 5x that is a large 50 megapixel sensor being in between the 1 and the 10x that is going to remain the same as before. What are your thoughts on that? For me, the biggest issue here is that there's that gap between 1x and 5x, right? like 2x and 3x are going to suffer a little bit, even though it's a 200 megapixel main sensor. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, if the rumor is true.
Well, it's funny because when people think, oh, a new Samsung phone, right? They immediately think that there's going to be all these new cameras because every year, as the phones get better, there's different cameras. So, for them to keep it kind of the same is interesting. The sensors, I don't. I think people who really want to take professional photographs with their smartphones really enjoy having those choices, right? The different
Yeah.
sensors. I think that most people, mainstream people who are just using their smartphones for everyday shooting their kids or sports or whatever, um, I don't know that they use those options as much as a professional photographer does, or somewhere in between.
Do you think that as these extra lenses appear and become more commonplace, because the iPhone now has a 5x telephoto on the Pro Max, right? Do you think people discover and go, oh, wow, I can do this now? And then they start using it? Because I feel like that's what's happening, right? Eventually, somebody will be like, oh, look, I can zoom really good now. I couldn't zoom really good before, right?
Right. And I think they don't even know that is my point. I think they don't know what the phones are capable of. I think they don't dive deep into and, oh, I can change the aspect ratio. Oh, I can change the lens here. They don't know. They just point and shoot,
Right.
And maybe as consumer education happens, or as these features like massive zooming in of a beautiful 200 megapixel camera, they see it and they go, yeah, I can do this. But yeah, I don't think that they know that those features are there until maybe someone accidentally stumbles upon it and says, wow, look what my phone can do.
Do you not think that Apple has nice tutorials that tell people when they get their new phone what to do? Like, do you think
Sure.
that's just left for discovery, or do people skip those? What's your take on
I
that?
think no, I think it's like reading instructions on how to, set up your bureau or, put shelves together. I think nobody reads that.
Okay. Even though Apple makes it easy, right?
Apple makes it so easy. And I mean, look, YouTube is filled. Anytime you need to figure out how do I
Yeah.
reset
How
the
do I do?
Bluetooth
Yeah.
in this,
Right.
how do I do this? You can just go on and watch these great videos and go, wow, I didn't know I could do that. Apple makes it super easy, but I don't think the majority of Apple iPhone users are going on looking at tutorials on how to use the different lenses on their smartphone.
Sure. What I'm excited about here is to see that for a long time, AI was a crutch, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. There's using a crutch in a positive way and using the crutch in a negative way. This is really a positive thing. AI was the crutch for phone photography. Google showed us the way, right? With a Pixel. Sensors that were kind of basic, simple, not that sophisticated, with great software and AI that made things better. But even Google now has high quality sensors, lenses, periscope, telephotos, fancy OIS and autofocus mechanisms, and incredible hardware. And I feel like the two need to live hand in hand, because AI only took us so far, and now we've reached the limits what the hardware can do. That's why I'm excited about, kind of diving into these details of the Samsung. And I'm going to kind of rapid fire through a bunch of other photography related items. If you guys want to explore the audience on your own time, the links are going to be in the show notes here. In addition to this rumor about the Samsung, we've got rumors about Oppo's flagship, like the model above the OnePlus 12, the Find series, Find X series. And, so you got the Realme GT5 Pro that just came out, then you get the OnePlus 12, and then a little up from there, we're going to get the Find X7 Pro. And that's supposed to have a dual periscope lens now. So that means basically two telephoto lenses that are kind of insane. And to me, that's like, okay, they're going crazy on the hardware. One would be a 3X and the other one would be a 6X. So, it's like not quite clear how this would work, but it's interesting that they're doing it because, again, they're like, let's try something new. And then you throw the AI sweet pie on top of that. Like it's like the icing on the cake. So it'd be really interesting to see what happens. The other one that I want you folks to check out is that the Honor Magic series, which is the flagship from Honor, which is getting pretty popular in Europe right now. Supposedly is going to have a 160 megapixel telephoto, meaning they're going to do some zooming at 3x with optics, but then the rest of it's all going to be using essentially sensor crop, which is an interesting approach. And in addition, the variable aperture, this is something we've seen on Huawei phones and we're starting to see on Xiaomi phones at the high end, like a real camera. Andrea, where you can change the aperture so you can change the f-stop. Again, this is not something the average person will care about. But if you want to leave your DSLR behind, this is going to be a big deal, right?
Well, yeah, and that was something I think when I saw the Pixel 7 camera hardware at first or software at first, they were showing that or showing something similar to that and using AI and creating those far, far away shots. It is going to be exciting what we can do with photos.
I think what's nice with this is that they're not having to emulate it in AI. So the AI has to do a bit less work, and I think it's going to look a little more natural. We'll see how it goes. Another thing I'll put in the show note, folks, is Ben's review of the Vivo X100 series, specifically the X100 Pro, because he talks a lot about the telephoto quality on that. And he actually does show how the bokeh effect being natural instead of artificial actually makes the photos look basically more real, right? And you saw that video, right? It's kind of amazing what that camera can do. And this is something we can't get in North America. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's so crazy. And, this is the phone that I saw at MediaTek.
Yeah, correct? That's right. It's the MediaTek Dimensity 9300.
The 9300 chip. So somebody took a picture of myself and Eliane. And they were far, far away and then came over and showed it to us. And it was about as clear and crisp and close up a shot that, they should have been standing right next to me. And I even said to Eliane, man, we don't have these in the US. Like, why? Why don't we get these? I don't understand why we don't get to have all of these phones that, the rest of the world, China, India, that they get and they can have options. Realistically, I understand it's the whole carrier thing and how carriers subsidize phones and how it works here. But boy, that's a beautiful phone.
I think the problem, Andrea, is that we are so much of a duopoly. It's back to the beeper and iMessage conversation, right? It's like people have iPhones, maybe they have Samsung phones, and then, there's a drop in the bucket down there of OnePlus, Google, Moto, right? And the reality is if you're a manufacturer, it's not cost effective to bring these phones. These are $1,000 flagships, $1,000 plus flagships. They have so much hardware in them. It's expensive to make. You're not sure how successful it's going to be when you bring them to North America. You're not having that great success with them in Europe. It's good, but not great. The only place where you really are successful with these phones is China. Why would you not, keep them there? And that's the problem. And it's because, again, iOS is winning, right? And if Android was the dominant OS, I think we'd have a better chance to see these. And to be frank with you, the OnePlus Open that we can get in North America is able to take these telephoto shots as clearly as the Vivo X100. I think the Vivo X100 is able to go a little further, but overall, I've taken some very candid, very far away portraits of people at events that I've been able to show them after, and they were excited, and I sent them the photos and stuff with the Open. And so we have this now. The S23 Ultra and the upcoming 24 Ultra let you do that as well. So it's just, this is a little better. This is bringing it up a notch. And to me, what's exciting is that, it's a MediaTek chip for a change. It's a MediaTek Dimensity 9300.
I was just going to say that. It's a beautiful phone and it has a MediaTek chip, that new chip with the Edge AI that they were talking about, that honestly, for however many years I've been covering consumer technology, and I don't do a lot of phones themselves, hardware, I didn't realize MediaTek was in so many products that I own. We just don't know that here. Yeah. So to be able to have that as a flagship chip in a flagship phone, I would love to be able to have a choice like that, but no, here I think it's Samsung and it's going to be Qualcomm, Snapdragon.
The good news is that the Vivo X100 series is coming globally. Last year's the X90, which was its predecessor, was only China, and so we couldn't get it even PR wouldn't get us review units. I've requested a review unit. Hopefully I get one. Because it's a global device, they will probably send me one. I'll work hard to do that because I think I don't want to be left out of this one. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, you should do that one.
Another quick photography related story is Techno, which is kind of like the sister brand of Infinix. These are owned by a conglomerate of Shenzhen-based company that is basically addressing developing markets. They're big in Africa, India, and the Eastern Europe countries. They make some very impressive phones. You've probably heard of the Techno folding phones that we saw at MWC. So same deal, the same company. They're been pushing the envelope. They recently had a little future lens event where they showcase some of the photography technology they're working on. And one of the things that strikes me here is something we've seen before, again, as prototype and never in production, but might be coming to production, is liquid lenses. Instead of a lens that's made of glass or plastic, it's basically a drop of water. It's obviously highly pure water and distilled and everything. But because it's kind of self-contained in a sealed system, it can be stretched, the drop, and adjusted, right? Like by basically applying electric currents to it. And that means that you can make a lens like our eyes, that can change with basically muscles pulling it. And that means that now you can have better focus. You can zoom in by having just the drop shape change, right? So it's called a liquid lens. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see that in somebody's smartphone. I'm not sure it's going to be Techno.
That would be fascinating.
Right? So the idea is that right now we have these periscope lenses, that are folded and take up a lot of space in the phone. Imagine having the same thing, but on a normal size camera system, simply because you have this drop of water inside there that can be stretched and pulled. Kind of fascinating. One thing that I think you're going to be super excited about, that I am absolutely stoked about, and I've got an incoming review unit, is Peach Fuzz from Moto.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Although, they also make a beautiful purple color. So.
Well, they have the purple for the Razr and then the magenta for the Razr Plus. So just to fill you in,
but
folks,
the whole Pantone color of the year, I actually think it's a great partnership. I really do. It's silly, but it's fun. Yes.
Exactly. So I'm excited that Peach Fuzz is the Pantone color of the year. It is kind of like a champagne color, and they're making a Razr Plus and a Moto Edge 40 Neo, which is sold in Europe only. It's very similar to the Moto Edge Non Plus that we get here in the US. And so I'm just getting the Razr Plus, but just for photo op, because it's going to be beautiful. Last year they sent me one of the Edges from Europe that actually they sold officially in the US because it was the Pantone color. It was a pink color of some kind. And guess what, Andrea? It came in a box that was scented to match the color. And so awesome. For a while, this whole phone it had vegan leather and it smelled like the color. It was kind of amazing.
So I'm wondering if the peach fuzz
is going to scent. Exactly. Yeah. It'll be interesting to find out.
That velvety, gentle peach fuzz, I think
just kind of love the name.
I do too.
And you know what? I got to give Moto props. Even though this is a total gimmick, this just warms my heart. I don't know. I love the idea that not only is there a Pantone color of the year, but they're going out to make these phones and making a special edition. Who cares? They're not gonna make money on this. It's just
someone's gonna say, I want to have the color of the year. It's like an accessory, right? It's like spending money on a new pair of eyeglass frames, right?
I love it.
You want a different color? Go for it.
I love it. We're gonna talk about AI a little bit here at the end, but before we do this, one last item I wanted to talk about last week I didn't mention is Meizu. Very unknown brand, even in China now. Back in the day, Andrea, when smartphones started becoming a thing in China, before the Ascend part of the punt, because it's one of their brands of Huawei, right? Before they became a thing that we noticed in the West, I remember, I'm talking a decade ago, 2012, 13 at MWC. Huawei had a booth and we would go in there and go holy crap, look at these phones. They're so good. But we don't know anything about them. Meizu was the big competitor with Huawei back then. And Xiaomi was the third. There were these three brands, right? Mm-hmm. And so Meizu unfortunately did not grow as fast as Xiaomi and Huawei did. They did not manage to get the kind of growth and success. Eventually, they got bought by Geely, which is a big car manufacturer that's an EV car manufacturer in China. And I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago because I write about cars and EVs on Tech Radar. I'll link it in the show notes. And it's an article about how smartphone manufacturers are making cars in China, like Huawei and Xiaomi, and how car manufacturers are making phones. Polestar, which is owned by Geely, whatever you want to call it, which is essentially an offshoot of Volvo because they also own Volvo now. They are making a phone since they acquired Meizu. It's a rebranded Meizu 21. So Meizu came out with the 21, their current flagship, even though they're now not a separate company, but they're owned by this car company. And at the same time, they made a parallel identical phone for the Polestar brand for the cars that is a Polestar phone. And so, a lot of people here in North America, this is what the gist of my article is, that, we get in our car, we plug in Android Auto or CarPlay, and that's the best we can get because the infotainment system, most of our cars is really terrible. Tesla and, Rivian, for example, have shown us that, yes, you can make a really good infotainment system without Android Auto and CarPlay. A lot of you don't like that. A lot of you want your Android Auto and CarPlay, but hear me out for a second. When you log into your iPad, you don't project your phone screen on your iPad or your Mac, right? You don't project. Right. You log in with your Apple credentials and your entire experience from Apple is in that iPad all of a sudden. You get your messages, you get continuity, you get all your stuff. That's what China is doing with their EVs.
And it's also a different location, right? So if you're looking at your iPad, you may be looking for some completely different information than your phone.
So I think what I'm trying to say to folks, I know you can't wrap your head around that because a lot of you haven't driven Teslas for 6 years like I have. But trust me when I say that car infotainment, car tech, car software is an ecosystem play. It's about being vertical. Tesla will eventually make a phone in China, guaranteed. And there've been rumors about that. Apple will eventually make a car, guaranteed, because it's an ecosystem play. That is why it's not a big deal that your Tesla doesn't support Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, because it doesn't need to. Because it has its own vertical ecosystem and the Tesla app integrates fully into that ecosystem and makes your phone become part of that ecosystem.
One of the things you say is that these should all function as their own single cohesive system.
That's exactly right. And you can't have that if you are using like some kind of janky projection crutch. And I know it's counterintuitive because right now you go to the rental car counter and you get some sort of Nissan Altima or something and you're like, okay, this works. This is way better than what's built in. I'm going to stick with that. I don't blame you. But that's not where we're going. That is not the future. And when you see GM saying we're not going to do CarPlay and Android Auto in our EVs anymore, well, that's a bold statement, especially coming from them because they don't really know how to make software. But give them a chance because what they're trying to do is do what the Chinese are doing. They're trying to do this vertical thing. Will they succeed? Will they do it right? I have doubts. But at least give them a chance and see how it pans out because it'll be Google based. So if you can log in with your Gmail account in the car, Polestar has this right now, where if you get a Polestar, you log in with your Google credentials. And if you're an Android user, everything from your phone is on the car. But it's a separate thing. It's just like an iPad. It's amazing.
Right. You're not projecting right directly from your phone.
Exactly. Now, does it support everything? No. Does it need more work? Yes, because it's Google and Google always does things half-ass. But it could be, if we stopped relying on the crutch that is Android Auto and CarPlay, if more car makers worked with Google to make this a thing, or Apple even, if there was some kind of equivalent to CarPlay, but instead of projection was you log in with your Apple credentials, and this is actually agreed upon by Apple, and they've worked together with BMW or whomever to make this work. This could be a much better experience. And a lot of you are like, privacy, security, blah, 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 subscriptions. Yeah, well, guess what? Subscriptions are a thing. That's how the world works. Tesla doesn't charge a subscription for the software updates we get bi-weekly on their cars, and we get new features for free all the time. So it's up to the manufacturer to not be a jerk, right?
Right. But how do you think consumers are going to feel? Like, if say you're thinking about buying a car, right now they don't have to decide, I'm going to buy this manufacturer because they work with AirPlay, Apple, and this one because it's Android Auto. They want what they have to work together. So you're talking about people making these cars with their own ecosystem and then having a phone where everything is all together integrated. Is that going to change people's minds about what kinds of devices they buy or what kinds of cars they buy?
I think once you try Tesla, they're the poster child for this. If you try a Tesla, not just for one road trip, but actually live with one for a while, do a bunch of road trips that use the supercharger network, and you see that vertical integration and how well it plays with your phone and how seamless it is and how awesome it is and how you just end up on the car screen all the time. You never touch your phone. You'll see that this is the way to go. Because you know what? When you want to do route planning, Android Auto and CarPlay don't know the state of your battery. They don't know that the supercharger you're heading towards is full. All of that's not available to that ecosystem because it's a projection. But if it's seamlessly integrated into the Tesla ecosystem, if your phone knows everything, I can go to my phone right now and tell you how I can get to New York City from here and tell you how many stops it's going to take, where I'm going to charge, how long I'm going to wait, everything. In my phone and send it to the car, and it'll do it.
You don't have to open 5 different apps to tell you, is that one full?
Which is what you have to do on all the other EVs.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I think people just need to just think about a little outside the box here. Otherwise, we're going to be in another iMessage versus beeper kind of situation where everybody's just going to be entrenched in their auto and CarPlay experiences, and it's never going to advance things. It's not compatible with where we're going with the future of transportation. So hear me out. GM's probably going to fail because they're not very good at this, but just give it a chance. The Chinese are showing us the way here, right? So it's really fascinating to me. Also, what we discussed was Quinn last week. I have an article coming on Tech Radar this week that talks about the Cybertruck and how, even though whether you like it or not, whatever your position is on Tesla or whatever else, read the article, because the tech that they have implemented in this car for both the manufacturing of it and the actual operation of the car is absolutely a breakthrough. It is changing the game. It's changing the industry again, as much as the original Model S changed the game. And this is why Tesla leads. I hate to say it, I don't like Elon, and I'm stuck because I'm a Tesla. I feel like I'm same thing as with my Pixel and the caller features and Apple users with their iMessage lock-in. I feel locked into Tesla because it's so good. The experience is so good. I don't want to leave
delivers. It. Yeah.
Despite the fact that I don't want to give him more money, Speaking of Google, let's talk briefly about Gemini. They announced this 10 days ago or so. What's your take on that? I don't really understand. Is this just a new MML that they've released and added onto Bard then, or what?
I believe so. And I believe, it's going to be, go up against ChatGPT-4, I guess. But I mean, what struck me when I saw the whole thing last week was all the kerfuffle over the demo, right? Where the demo was apparently not exactly the experience that a regular user would have if they were using this. So it was like, what? Google didn't tell the truth? Really? But yeah, I mean, I'm not a big Bard fan right now anyway.
It's not that good.
No. I mean, I used it a few times. I don't use it a lot. I don't rely on it. But I think that's the idea, is that they're going to come up with this big, massive language, and incorporate it everywhere. I still need to see more about this.
Yeah, I wanted to let you know, folks, that it exists and you should watch out. If you're like me and you've been using ChatGPT, to get summaries and headlines, I write a lot of my headlines with that, and you like it and it works for you, and you've tried Bard and it didn't quite deliver the same kind of awesomeness. Although, to be frank, I think that awesome is a little strong even for ChatGPT. But look, it's still better than Bard, in my opinion. So hopefully Gemini will make things better, right?
Yeah, I think it definitely will make it better. And I think this is also one of those iOS Android things, right? Like, what are you used to? If you've been using ChatGPT-4 and you understand how to ask it questions and you understand how to get the right response, maybe Bard is a little cumbersome for you, but hopefully this Gemini, hopefully will make it a different user experience.
Choice is a good thing.
Yes.
So check it out, folks. It's rolling out. I just got an email from Google saying, try it. Because I guess I've been using Bard. So they're like, oh, you've been using it. So maybe we'll give it to you first or something. I don't know. The bottom line is AI. We could have a whole podcast about it. I have a lot of thoughts. I'm sure you do too. Maybe we should do that sometime. Andrea, will you tell the world where they can find you on the internet, where you write, where you are on social media, all the things you do?
Okay. Andrea Smith is my name, pronounced Andrea, but I do love when Miriam pronounces it with a beautiful European accent. Last month, I officially gave up that other platform, the X platform. I was at Andrea Smith, but I don't really use it anymore. But I'm on Instagram and as Andrea Smith Tech. And I'm on Threads as Andrea Smith Tech, and I'm on Blue Sky, I think. Blue Sky as well. And AndreaSmithTech.com is my website, which badly needs to be updated. But I don't get time to because I've been busy writing a whole lot of hardware consumer reviews, which you can usually find on CNN and Techlicious.com.
Awesome. Folks, do read Andrea's work. She is incredibly awesome. She has such a good idea of what the mainstream wants. Like, you know how I'm just all the nerds all the time. I love reading authors who address more the mainstream. And Andrea, you're my go-to for that.
And you're my techie go-to.
Thank you. Folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL on all the platforms. It's like Tankgirl, the comic book. Just drop all the vowels. I'm still on X for better for worse, just lurking there, mostly posting links to my work. And then on Threads, I'm more active. So find me there if you really want to converse with me. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Blue Sky. So check it out. See me on social media and chat with me if you can. Also, the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the platforms. Please subscribe, tell your friends about it. And if you can, rate or review the show in whatever app you use for your podcasting. Also, I want to tell you about the YouTube channel. There's a YouTube channel, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. It's got a bunch of unboxing and hands-on videos. Like about once a month, I put something up there. It's not super busy, but support me by doing the YouTube things like subscribe, telling your friends, clicking the notification bell, and commenting, all that good stuff. So please check out the YouTube channel. And of course, if you want to help me financially, there's a Patreon. So I mentioned this early in the show, but Patreon has a bunch of perks, but the biggest one, the one that seems to be the most popular, is the video version of the podcast. It comes out a day or so ahead, and you get to see me and my guests on video. And sometimes I leave in bloopers and I leave in other extras. Sometimes you go overtime and I leave that in. So check it out. It's a nice little perk. It's not very expensive, and it does support me and help me continue doing this podcast on a regular basis. Patreon.com/TNKGRL. That's patreon.com/Tankgirl. And if you don't like Patreon, but you want to help, there's a PayPal link in the show notes. Click through and give me a $5 donation for my coffee habit. And I'd love that. Yeah, that's it. I want to thank our sponsor, Mint Mobile, as well. So as you know, I'm constantly reviewing multiple phones, and while that's fun, it also means I'm constantly spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. That's where Mint Mobile comes in, and that's who I'm partnering with for today's podcast. If you also want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. As tech-savvy early adopters, you've probably heard of Mint Mobile before, but let me quickly tell you how awesome their service is. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around and waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current device and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM free of charge. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, lightning fast 5G, and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link mintmobile.com/mobiletech to get premium wireless starting for $15 a month. That's mintmobile.com/mobiletech. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And I want to thank Andrea for being my guest this week. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you so much.
We'll definitely have you on the show at some point in the future, maybe to talk about AI. And folks, we will have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.